Hey folks, it's Ray at Rainmaker.com here and taking a complete in-depth review of the Tacx NEO Motion Plate. Now, I've been using them for a few months now, so I've got a pretty good idea where they work well and where they fall a little bit short. As you saw, the install is super easy, but let's actually back up to what's in the box themselves. So we got the box right here. Once you crack it open, there's exactly 3 things in there. There are 2 rails, and then there's a front wheel mount. Actually, there's 4 things if you include the little piece of paper there, but you won't need that after this video because this is silly, simple stuff. Now at this point, go ahead and remove the plastic and notice that there is a left side and a right side. Also notice there's arrows towards the front, like you're riding a bike. If you're riding it backwards, it's not gonna work very well. Now from a compatibility standpoint, this is compatible with every Tacx NEO ever made. Tacx NEO OG, the 0, the 1, whatever you want to call it, number 1, the Tacx NEO 2, the Tacx NEO 2 SE, and the Tacx NEO 2T. It's all of them, it's all the same. And that's because the base of the NEO series has not changed at all. It's identical across all of them. It's kind of like a happy engineering accident that allows these things to snap in there. Now to install this is super easy. Simply take your NEO, tilt it up, grab the little rubber feet, and they pop into these little holders built into the motion tray themselves, which is actually pretty clever of them. And then you grab the next 2, put them in this one. There we go. And then we take the one that says left and the arrow facing forward and put it on the left-hand side. It has magnets, so it kind of pops it in place like this. Take the right-hand side, the exact same concept down here. And there we go. We're done. To line itself back up again, make sure this is straight. And next you need to make sure this little ridge, or not ridge, this notch is aligned perfectly. So lift this up slightly and just simply slide it back so it's lined up is when it centers. There we go. Otherwise you won't have your full kind of range or extension of range there. And do the same on the other side. That one's perfect. And then finally take your front wheel block. You'll see the arrow there that faces forward. Toss it out here. Throw your bike on it and align the midpoint of the hub of the front wheel with that little arrow there on the wheel block. Also note, this won't work with mountain bike tires. It's just simply too thin for it. The wheel block is notable here because it allows your wheel to move forward and back. Most front wheel blocks are designed to go ahead and keep your wheel in a static location, but this one allows movement so you can roll back and forth no problem. Now the whole point of the Tacx NEO Motion Plates is to go forward and backwards, about 2.5 to 3 centimeters, or roughly about an inch, and you'll see that like this, it just simply moves front and back. Now the NEO series trainers themselves already have a little bit of tilt side to side, not much, but it's more than most other trainers do. Now to show you what's happening with a little more detail, if I take one of these rails and toss it onto a table, you can see that there's 2 wheels per side or per rail, and then it has a little valley groove under each wheel. As I roll either forward or back, it increases in elevation. We're talking like a centimeter here. And then if I go back to the center point, it goes down to the middle of the valley, so it'll always self-center back to the midpoint. This is the exact same concept that the Ceres MP1 uses for their rocker plate and other rocker plates as well, just having that little kind of valley concept in the middle, so you always self-center back to the midpoint. Now at this point, I think we're ready to ride. So if I'm doing the tic-tac-toe thing correctly, I just simply bounce and then I come back. It didn't. Boom! Look at that. Got skills. Okay, so you see as I pop on here, you get a little bit of movement right away. We'll go ahead and get Zwift started up right there, just so we have somewhere to go. There we go. And you'll see even just with the super light pedaling right now, it's just got that slight bit of movement. As I go ahead and increase my pedaling, I increase that movement slightly. There's absolutely no sound whatsoever with this, by the way. It is completely silent on the rollers. Obviously you hear my drivetrain, but it's otherwise totally silent from the NEO plates themselves. Just to show you the max amount of movement, I'm just going to sway my body back and forth. And there we go. This is the furthest it can go. I'm basically hitting the blockers at both ends right there. So again, that 2.5 to 3 centimeters or so, give or take. And the idea here isn't to go ahead and replicate the entire outdoor road feel experience. The point here is to go ahead and improve the indoor long ride training experience. The 1 to 3 hour indoor trainer rides, probably more erg workouts than necessarily a full-on sprint race. To have that little bit of movement. When you have that little bit of movement, that in turn forces your butt to move around just slightly, like a millimeter or so, which makes long rides more comfortable than being perfectly static the entire time. And I say erg workouts because if I were to throw down a sprint right here, you'll notice that I go ahead and I quickly reach sort of the end point of this particular ETAP battery. Why are these batteries always dead? All the time, always dead. In any case, we're just going to do it in the gear I'm in. So as soon as I do the sprint, it'll go ahead and I'll hit the front there, And you won't really hear it, but you'll see it. And there's maybe a little bit of instability there that you wouldn't normally feel by itself. Not enough to like tip this over likely, but given that things are moving forward and back, it feels a little bit more stable with the hard sprint. But for my workouts, something like probably 60 or so, maybe 70% of them are structured workouts where it's more steady state with maybe some 30 by 30s or 15-second intervals tossed in, but not very many sprints. As you saw, removing these if you do have a race is trivial. It takes just a couple seconds to pop them off and you're good to go. Okay, so let's talk about the downside. No, not the sprint thing, but the cost. $299, which is like laughably insane. And we're talking about something that's literally just a piece of injection molded plastic with 2 magnets in it and a couple of rollers. Like, this should not be a $300 product. And I've had lots of conversations with Garmin about this, and at the end of the day, the problem is they're probably right. And that's what sucks about it, is that we talk a lot of times about like the Apple tax, for example, the tax that you pay when you buy an Apple product that is some cases just outrageously expensive for what it is. And I'm not talking like necessarily the phone or the laptop, but like the component upsales. For example, a hard drive somehow costing 3 and 4 times what that storage costs if you just buy it by yourself. The same is true for their like Pro Display XDR monitor stand. Not the display, that's expensive, but the stand itself costing over $1,000 for this little piece of metal. But we have here that was effectively the Tacx tax. Yeah, the Tacx tax, pretty clever, huh? But it's ultimately just the Garmin tax. And the challenge with it is that most times we talk about these things like the Apple tax, the Garmin tax, or whatever the case is, you're ultimately paying for something that's superior. And in this particular case, this isn't necessarily superior to everything out there. It's superior to what's in the market at that same price point. Let's take, for example, most rocker plates. If you were to buy a pre-assembled rocker plate, that's likely going to be between $300 and $450 for your standard issue kind of generic OEM rocker plate. Sometimes on the cheaper end, if you find a smaller boutique manufacturer, and usually like the $400 to $450 range for kind of larger ones. Now, of course, obviously those aren't the same thing. Those rocker plates at that price point anyways tend to tilt side to side. The Neo just barely does that by itself, but those have obviously way more range, but they don't tend to, for that price point anyways, go front and back. Again, you can custom build your own for far cheaper, but you're investing lots of time into that, and of course, time is money. But of course, let's talk about that $300 to $450 price point rocker plate. In that case, though, it is a far larger footprint. And in fact, where I've done most of my testing has not been here in this gigantic warehouse of a studio, but in fact at home. In that case, I'm in my shed, and that shed has no more space than the bike footprint itself. I can't even put a standard issue trainer desk there. There's just simply not the space for that. But there is the space for the motion plates, and they've worked perfectly on my older Neo 2 for the last couple months, primarily again in erg mode rided with some, Zwift like regular riding tossed in there, and they've been great. And again, that gets back to the challenge of this price point, is that as much as I hate Garmin for charging $300 for something that could do fantastically well at $149 or $200, there's just simply nothing else at that price point. And that gets us back to kind of a similar sort of product, which is the Wahoo Kicker Access Feet. These things cost $100, so far more reasonable, but they also don't do much. As I said in my trainer review when these came out on the Kicker V5 or 2020 a couple years ago, there is negligible difference between these and the stock feet, especially if you had a trainer mat. If you were putting it directly on concrete or hardwood or some more hard surface, then you might see, in the best of circumstances, barely like a millimeter of movement. I mean, you can go watch my video on this whole thing, just check it all out there. It's not very much. So in that case, they're charging $100 for something that you could achieve with 3 tennis balls that you stole from your local dog park for a whole lot less. And that's kind of why I think Garmin sort of missed the mark here. It's not that these products aren't worth, or this product is not worth $300. It's that they're coming in and feeding that narrative that says, here's a big multinational company buying a smaller company, a relatively smaller company, and then jacking up the prices and applying effectively the Garmin tax. Even if the product is great, which I think it is very, very solid for what I've used it for, and even if it probably is justified in terms of its price point, that doesn't change the fact that it just kind of feels wrong. But you know what feels right? Whacking that like button at the bottom there. It really does help out this video, this channel, the whole shebang, or you can subscribe. because that'll get you stay tuned or in the channel, whatever you want to call it, for the next set of videos, which will be pretty soon on like plenty more sports technology goodness. Next couple weeks, next couple months, but especially the next couple weeks are pretty busy. With that, have a good one.